Hello, my name is Becker, and I'm a teaching partner in the CAPS GS program. I teach primarily in the MBA program, but also in a number of undergraduate courses in the general area of business. In today's world, there are so many ideas that are competing for the attention of the minds of our students that I believe that as effective teachers, we have to use techniques that allow us to break through all that noise and allow their minds to focus very directly on the material that we have. Certain technologies have that ability to allow them to concentrate and focus and can bring them information very rapidly. Many of our learners are younger learners and are used to a business environment and a learning environment in which technology has just been a part of their lives. During the day, they're working with technology and they're used to very rapid flows of information to them. And so it makes sense that when we're working with the adult learners that we use the same technologies to allow their minds to keep up with what we're talking about and what we're doing. First, we try to give our learners instant access to the degree that we can to the materials that we have. We put a great number of the materials onto Blackboard so that they do not have to spend a lot of time finding where certain information is. For example, we'll put podcasts on so that they can take down that information and use it during the day when they're traveling, or we'll have streaming video attached to the Blackboard site so that they can get the information very quickly. We also use narrated PowerPoints that allow the lectures literally to be delivered offline. So that allows us to use the classroom time more effectively for in-class discussions and interactive projects that use the information rather than spending the time just on the lecture themselves. We use a number of interactive projects. We use modeling so that they can look at alternate scenarios of a given situation, doing some modeling that allows them to come to conclusions very rapidly. And we also are beginning to use some audience response systems. The audience response system allows the learner to understand the general consensus on a given subject among other members of the cohort almost instantly, and that allows them to process that information and get a better idea of what the entire group is thinking, and then we can move on in the discussion far faster than if we had to collect the information in a traditional form. One of the other uses that we make of the technology is feedback. The learners, of course, want feedback quickly regarding their written work and material they've submitted, and by using some spreadsheets particularly, we're able to give them far more detail and very rapidly, and they seem to appreciate getting that information back very quickly. We also use assessments that allow them to measure themselves against the characteristics, for example, a leadership style, a management style, and it allows them to get instant feedback and also to see themselves as a part of the cohort and where they stand and determine their relative position with respect to their fellow learners. Of course, with our interest in online learning and the hybrid environments, the ability to communicate with distant learners is a wonderful capability. And so by using some of the technology, regardless of where the learner is, we can have simultaneous audio and visual contact with that learner and basically continue the discussion as if we were together in a classroom. And this has proved very, very useful to the learners, particularly in the remote locations. The first thing we have to do is think outcomes first. What is it that the instructor is really trying to accomplish? It's kind of reverse engineering. What do we want the output to be? And then we can begin to think more clearly about the input. On the other hand, sometimes we don't know exactly what we can achieve when we're not familiar with the technology. So I often recommend that people what I would say is immerse themselves in the literature. Just begin to look at a large number of options and look at the different techniques that are available, talk to other people about what they're using. But by all means, attend many of the very short courses that are offered by the university's technical department. And by spending an hour, you can get a very quick understanding of what this technology is, what its capability is, and then try it. Start small, do one project, and begin to get comfortable with the technology, and then you'll find that you'll want to expand that project. And over a period of time, you'll become comfortable with it, and you'll want to move on as you see possibilities. But you'll learn about the possibilities by diving in, and that's probably the best way to begin. What you're about to see is a class that was given about 3 weeks ago for adult learners. They are concentrating in the HR management curriculum in the undergraduate program. And a particular subject that we were dealing with this night was the subject of motivation. The problem set was that many times the HR people do not really understand the motivations that are present in the workforce that they're in effect relating to. And so the objective was to determine their motivations, their perception of motivations of what workers feel, and to compare those with the perceptions that supervisors feel, and then thirdly to compare those perceptions against the research literature and what is being found in actual surveys. To do this, we're making use of the Turning Point Technologies, which essentially is an audience response system. In that system, PowerPoint slides have been created that have questions built into them, and the students are provided with a clicker that allows them to respond then to their choice of the answers of the question. And so we'll see the question, and then I'll ask them for their response. And after thinking about it for a moment or two, they will click on one of their clickers, and that will be recorded directly on the computer right in the PowerPoint slide, so we can tell when all have made their choice of a response. So on this device, it says 1A, 2B, 3C, etc. What you'll see on the screen will be a question, and it will have multiple choice answers. One will be a 1, one will be a 2, and a 3. There will be others that will have up to 10 answers on them. And so when we show that screen, then you choose the answer that is yours. For example, if you think number 7 is what you would answer that question as, then you would click number 7. Don't worry about the letters. We're just going to be using the numbers tonight. Okay? So if you think your answer is 7 on the board, you press 7. If the answer is 1, then you press 1. One of the first questions you'll soon see, you will all be answering number 1 for an obvious reason. And so, again, choose the number that corresponds to your answer. Now, what will be going on is we'll be asking a number of these questions, and I will instantly see the profile of the class. You will too, because after you've clicked it, and we have everybody's click, then we'll see the answers. So you will see, okay, if I chose 7, turns out I'm the only person in the class that thought that was the right answer. And you'll see what everybody else said. Now, what I used to have to do is I'd pass out a sheet of paper with paper and pencil, and you would check off the boxes, and then I have to go home and score them, and then bring them back next week and show you what the answers, what the profile of the class was. But we don't have to do that anymore, because instantly we'll have the profile of the entire class. And the learning can take place when you see, okay, this is how everybody else felt about it, and then we can see the differences in the kinds of responses that different questions are giving us, and you'll see the point that we'll be driving for as we go along. The subject that we're talking about tonight is going to be the subject of motivation. And from a labor relations point of view, understanding motivation is pretty important, because if our supervisors and our managers don't understand how our employees are motivated, the chances are they're going to make a number of mistakes and could cause the employees to be unhappy and therefore find grievances, and probably legitimate grievances, and begin to say things are not fair here, and I think it would be better that we have a union. And so a lack of understanding of motivation can influence the company in a very powerful way, and it might result in the union being able to come in. So, from the point of view of a number of human resource professionals, do you understand human motivation? Do you understand what motivates your workers? If you don't understand that, then it's going to be difficult for you to train other supervisors in that whole process. So that's why we're looking at motivation. Now, I'm going to go fairly quickly. If we were to spend the right amount of time on motivation, we would be here for the entire semester. But we don't have that. We have an hour. This is particularly a chart that will show a lot of the persons that are very influential and have given us the theories behind human motivation. And you're seeing some names that you're familiar with and probably some that you're not familiar with. Tonight we're going to look at primarily three people: Abraham Maslow, Douglas McGregor, and Frederick Herzberg. They are often considered a big three of motivational psychology. And yet, if we were to have an entire course, we would look at the impact that all of these others have had as well. Well, in looking at motivation, we can have a little bit of fun with it. If you ask on great theories of motivation, you were to ask Lou Holtz. Anybody know who Lou Holtz is? Lou Holtz was the football coach at the University of Minnesota. He was the football coach at Notre Dame, and recently was the football coach at the University of Arkansas. And he will tell you motivation is very simple. You simply eliminate those who are not motivated, and you will have a motivated group. That may be easy on a football team, but that's a little bit different in the workplace. You can't necessarily just eliminate the motivated people. Paul Dietzel from Louisiana State University says you can learn more character on the 2-yard line than anywhere else in life. Well, what's Dietzel saying? He's saying that adversity can bring out those that are truly motivated. And so oftentimes when there is adversity, we'll find those that are motivated. And finally, remember, Goliath was a 40-point favorite over David, and David still won. So we're going to look at some of these people and see what some of their theories are, and then let's see how well you understand or believe what some of these people are saying. What are your attitudes towards motivation? So again, looking at Maslow, Herzberg, and McGregor because of the time that we have tonight. First of all, motivation will break itself down into two main headings. One is intrinsic motivation, and the other is extrinsic. What do we mean by intrinsic motivation? What do you think that is? Classic motivational theories are Maslow, and tonight we're just going to talk about Herzberg and McGregor because of time. Do you remember Abraham Maslow? Anybody remember him? Yeah. Okay. Sometimes we think that old guys with beards like that who lived a long time ago don't have anything to say to us in today's world, but perhaps they do. Maslow was one of the first of the motivational psychologists that came along and in effect said that man has a series of needs, one on top of the other, and the motivation will be increased as we work our way up that line. To start with, he said, we have physiological needs. We have a need for air, food, and water. Would you agree?
Okay? If you are drowning in the ocean or in the lake, do you need a Mercedes or a lifeline? Obviously, you need a lifeline because air is more important than a Mercedes at that point in time. But let's assume we have air, food, and water. The next level that Maslow claimed is that we need security. By security, he means the absence of pain, safety, stability. And so we can recognize that maybe our employees have air, food, and water. The next thing that they really want is security. Is that reasonable? And we would agree that that's pretty reasonable, that people want that. But they don't need that until they're satisfied with air, food, and water. Again, that's a higher level need. Then the third level that Maslow tells us is what we call affiliation, or the feeling of belonging, prestige, or respect. How in your companies do you motivate employees with that? What do you do? Now, how do we bring that into the company? Okay, we can take our triangle, we'll reverse the triangle here and bring the level 1 down at the bottom. Basic physiological needs may equal a salary. In other words, employees expect a decent salary. All right? Does that motivate them completely? No. All right? The next level, we said, Maslow said, was the security needs. People want some job security or physical safety. After that, they want friends in the workroom. Why do we have a bowling club? Or book clubs? Or any other kind of clubs in the company? People have a need for affiliation and a feeling of belonging and working with other people. After that comes esteem needs. How do we translate that? That may become a job title, which gives them a feeling of importance. You go into a bank, and what's just about everybody in the bank? What's the title of everybody in the bank? What? Lots of people in the banks are vice presidents. Okay? As you, as somebody coming into the bank, if someone says, just a minute, I'll get one of our vice presidents to deal with you, you feel pretty good. Because the vice president is going to be talking to you. And you feel that person is fairly important. So banks use that for a great deal. And then, very importantly, that top level, self-actualization need. How does that translate into the workplace? A challenging job or an exciting climate. Do we really appreciate that our employees want a challenging job or an environment that's exciting to work in? Or do we just assume they don't care? Oftentimes around the office or in the company, we'll be discussing a problem and we'll say, we've got a communications problem. All of our problems are communications problems, right? We hear that an awful lot. Our problems are communications problems. Well, how can we use what Maslow has taught us in order to improve communications? Well, over on this side, we have some of the Maslow hierarchies. Let's see what we can say. As a supervisor, can the supervisor talk about a question that's important in the mind of the employee? What is my job? Employees want to know what their job is. That's a sense of security. If I understand what I'm supposed to do, or what if I'm supposed to do this under this circumstance, I have some security that I'm doing the right thing. But if I don't know what I'm supposed to do, I have insecurity. So if our supervisors can simply communicate effectively to the employees what's their job, they're going to be dealing with that very low level need for security. How well am I doing? Do people want to know how well they're doing? That again will apply to security. Moving up the line, the feeling of belonging. How do we deal with that? Does anybody care? Do our supervisors express concern or care about the things that are affecting their employees? If there's an expression of care, then the employee is liable to feel that there is somebody that cares for me around here and I feel like I belong here. And that's going to satisfy a deep need inside of employees. Herzberg came along a little bit after Maslow and said, Maslow, I understand what you're saying, but it's not very clear to bring you directly into the business proposition, into the business community, into our offices and factories, because you're speaking in very theoretical terms. Can we bring it down a little bit so that we can understand things in an office or business environment? And so Herzberg did his research, and he came to some conclusions. And he said, number one, that factors in the environment do not motivate. Factors in the environment don't motivate. And what does that imply? It is the job itself that provides motivation. So he looked at a whole series of environmental factors, and he decided that he would break them up and put them into two categories. One he calls hygiene factors, and the other are motivators. What's a hygiene factor? When you hear that word hygiene, what do you think of? What's hygiene mean?
Clean.
Clean? Okay. It's protecting you, it's clean, it's protecting you against germs or something like that. Well, when you get up in the morning, now we're talking about motivators here. When you get up in the morning and you decide to brush your teeth, you take your toothbrush and say, "Oh, I am really motivated. This is really motivating me." Is that what happens?
When I get a new toothbrush,
Okay. All right. If we say that doesn't motivate me, why are you doing it? If it isn't motivating you, why are you doing it?
It's habit.
Habit?
Prevent cavities. Prevent cavities.
Prevent something bad from happening. All right. You know that that is not necessarily motivating you, but failure to do that is going to cause you a problem. And if we continue not to do that, maybe our teeth are going to fall out sometime. So we do it to prevent something bad from happening, but it does not necessarily make us all motivated. That's what Herzberg found when he gets into the business. And that is things like company policy, supervision, salary. He's saying these things do not motivate. Well, I would have thought salary would have been a motivator, wouldn't you? Okay. He's saying no. That's a hygiene factor. That's like brushing your teeth. We have to have a good salary so that we can get along, but that in and of itself isn't making us more motivated than brushing our teeth. Douglas McGregor came along a little bit later and tried to show the effect of different kinds of supervisors, the styles of supervisors, and the impact that they had on motivation. He broadly declared that supervisors, in his view, fell into two categories. One was what he called Theory X supervisors, and the other were Theory Y. Theory X supervisor tended to believe what you see up here. People dislike work and try to avoid it. Employees have little ambition because they are basically lazy. Employees are self-centered and have little interest in the organization. They don't care that much about the company. Employees prefer to be directed and to avoid responsibility. What would Herzberg have said about these? It's contrary to what Herzberg said, isn't it? Okay. So sometimes we have supervisors that are, you would call them maybe bad supervisors. They are threatening supervisors. They constantly want to challenge or threaten you. I had a supervisor once that fell in this category who told me, he said, I do not believe that any employee will do anything for the company unless I can threaten to fire him. That's the only reason that people will work hard, is so that they won't get fired. That's a Theory X kind of supervisor. But McGregor said there are others that he called Theory Y supervisors. They don't believe employees are lazy. They don't believe that they naturally dislike work. They believe that their employees can be internally motivated to reach objectives, and that employees can be committed to goals to the degree that they can receive personal rewards when they reach their objectives. These are positive supervisors. And so we've learned in our training programs in companies that we want to discourage Theory X behavior and encourage Theory Y behavior. Now, we've got to see where all this is going in just a minute. So, if we just lined up these two people, Herzberg and Maslow, we can see that to a certain extent they were saying very much the same thing. They used slightly different categories. We can see over here that Herzberg used motivational factors and hygiene factors and broke that down as we see it. And Maslow used self-actualization, esteem, belonging, safety, security, and physiological needs. To what extent do our supervisors, and do we, understand this and believe it to be true or not true? Okay, now we're going to use our clickers. All right, so if you all take your clicker, and the first question is a very tough one. Okay, we'll get a little practice. Are you female or male? And I would expect that we will see a large number of ones. Okay, I have 10, 11, 12, 13. We have 13 people. I think we have 14. What? You can press it again. It will not record it again. It will only confirm that you've already pressed it once. Okay? 14. There we go. All right? All right. It worked. All right. The answer came back. 100% of you are female. And I would confirm that that was the correct answer. Okay, now it's going to get a little different. In what sector of the economy do you work? Are you in private business or in government or in social services of some kind? So go ahead and fire your clicker. I have 12. Now I have 14. Okay. All right. 93% of you report that you are in private business. No one is in government, and 7% of you are in social services. See the way this is working? All right, now we're going to go on a little bit. How many years of experience in these organizations do you have? Less than 10 or more than 10? What do you think your supervisor would rate as the most importance of these factors in terms of motivation? If you were to ask your supervisors, what would they say would be the most important motivator of all these? So you got one choice. So 29% of you said full appreciation of work done. Okay? The next highest was 21%. 6, 6. You said that good working conditions, your supervisors thought that that was the most motivational aspect. What did Herzberg say about working conditions? Was it a motivator or a hygienic factor? Hygienic. We have to have them. Not having good working conditions is bad, but they in themselves are not motivators. Okay? So if this is true, your supervisors don't understand motivation the way Herzberg would explain it, at least. All right? So let's look at something else. After 21%, we have 2 at 14%. It would be 3 and 4. Okay, promotion and growth in the organization and good wages came in 3rd or 4th. Does that surprise anybody? And take a look at the results of a big survey that was done. Number 1 was what? Interesting work. Okay? The number 1 that employees said that was the best motivational factor was interesting work. How close were we on that? At one point it was 14% said that. That's what they claimed was number 1. Now, is this going to change with economic conditions? This was taken a couple of years ago, admittedly. And maybe today, with the recession, etc., maybe security would move. After all, Maslow said things are going to go up and down and change. So maybe back when things were much better, they felt this way. Maybe they feel a little differently now. But at least when things were good, they said interesting work was number 1. Number 2, what was number 2? Full appreciation for work done. Doesn't that tie pretty closely with Maslow said? Very, very closely. Number 3, a feeling of being in on things. Same thing. The higher level Maslow needs are what employees are telling us is motivating them. Do we understand that? And what human resource decisions are you making? And are you making them based on reality or what you think is true? A recent survey done not too long ago, I think sort of corroborates this. It's a fairly sophisticated survey. It was done by the Towers Perrin organization, and many of you know of Towers Perrin. They do an awful lot of research in the field of human resources and are consultants to a lot of companies. And they did a survey recently on the 10 key drivers of engagement across the various quadrants. And to what extent was pay a driver of engagement? To what extent was benefits, the work environment, and learning and development? And as you can see from this, the number 1 was the reputation in the job market as a good employer. They wanted to feel good about working for a well-recognized company. Teamwork. 3 jumped up to clarifying what the company expects and what you can expect in return. Very much like we saw with Maslow in what is my job? Do employees understand what their job is? 4, providing recognition for talented employees. 5, where in the world does pay fit in? It's not in the top numbers here. So, this is simply to say that as human resource people, we really need to study the concepts of human motivation and have a pretty good understanding of what motivates our employees. Maybe we need to do some surveys in our own organization because our organizations are going to be different. Employees are going to be different in different organizations. Maybe we need to take some surveys of our supervisors. To what extent do our supervisors see it? What would happen if you did this with your supervisors and your employees? And you found we had 2 completely different points of view. It might be very revealing of where some of our problems are in the company. And if we can do something about those, a lot of what we've talked about in terms of unionization may go away. Okay, I think we're at the end of this part of it.
I felt that this particular class went quite well. I've used this technology a number of times. In this case, the class knew that they were being photographed, so I'm sure they were conscious of that. the class was quite interested in using the technology. In fact, after the class was over, a number of them asked me if they could do it again. On one of the written assignments afterwards, even though the question was not related to technology, a number of them wrote that they would like to use this from time to time, purely unsolicited. Well, from a strengths point of view, I think that the primary reason for using it and the major strength is to create active student participation. We've all experienced the issue of talking to students, asking questions, and often waiting somewhat for a response. Because of the technology, they see the question and they have a chance to think about it, but more importantly, they see their answers reflected immediately. And so there's feedback instantly, which creates more active listening and a willingness to discuss the issues somewhat more so than if it is just a verbal question. The idea, I believe, really facilitates peer learning because they begin to see the responses of other students in the class, comparing that to their response, and that generates generally questions as to why are the other students thinking what they're thinking, and that allows a very easy discussion to follow. I think the instant feedback is what they like. In today's world, people want instant feedback from whatever they're looking at, and this responds very well to that rather than waiting a week or so before they get answers back, that type of thing. The weaknesses, I don't feel that there's any inherent weaknesses in the technology itself from an educational point of view. But here's an issue. That is that it is a fairly technical system, and so there is a learning curve for the instructor. However, I think the biggest issue is the availability of the units themselves. Currently, they're being kept in the library, and for those of us who teach at Red Fox or Normandale, this presents a real issue. I think it's probably fine for those teaching right in RC, but if you're teaching anywhere else, it's a bit of a problem. You would have to come out to campus, pick up the unit, go to where you're teaching it, and then return it. I think that over the long run, we're going to need to place some of these units in remote locations such as Normandale and Red Fox so that they're very easily available to the instructors. Well, in thinking about that question, I came to the realization that using Turning Point particularly causes me to examine more closely exactly what it is I'm trying to do. If I'm going to use the system, I've got to design the questions, and I've got to think in terms of the way they'll respond to the questions. All of this process causes me to think better, I believe, as to the question I'm going to ask and why I'm going to ask that question. And then I'm going to know what am I going to do with the answers, because the answers are going to be flashed on the screen immediately, and where do we go from there? So in terms of a layout and planning, I think it really is encouraging me, if not forcing me, to think better about questions and planning as to what it is that we're really trying to accomplish with the discourse in the classroom. In terms of the impact that technology is having in our classroom and on me particularly, I believe that one of the advantages that I really see to it in general is the ability to use time more effectively. A number of these solutions allow us to have more content into the classroom session than otherwise would be available. By using instruments where the computer is scoring it, for example, you get instant feedback, and you can then spend more time in analyzing the results of that feedback and the whys of it than explaining other facets to it. So I think it is a time saver, and there is no question that the technology, as long as it's not overused, and I think you can overuse the technology, as long as it's not overused, it is of an interest to the students, and they enjoy participating in it, and anything that causes them to take a greater interest in the subject matter that we're talking about, I think is going to increase the learning. In terms of thinking out of the box, I believe that technology in general forces me to think about alternatives to my teaching plan or my lesson plan. I'm able to say, well, now how would this go over if we did it this way? What would be the effect if we use that? For example, if I would use some of this as an assignment and build the technology in the Blackboard, and then when they come to class, we can use the class time for a case study, applying that, and they don't have to spend the time listening to that. So I think it changes the whole dynamics of the lesson plan and how we can do something. In terms of time saved, I think one illustration of that is by building some of the assessments that we're using, computer-based assessments, right into Blackboard so that they can take them outside of class, and then we spend the time in class doing something else. Or, as actually is going to take place tonight, we will be using a computer-based assessment in class, but the feedback will be instant and will allow us to continue the discussion of that in a greater depth and in more time than we'd otherwise have. What we're beginning to do now is to take our PowerPoints that we are so familiar with and narrate our, if you will, lecture into the PowerPoints and take them offline and assign the students to listen to the PowerPoints offline. When we then get to class, we have the opportunity to spend far more time on a higher level of thinking, such as the analysis of a case, where they begin to apply what they've learned directly to the situation. Now, one of the features that we're adding to that is that during the narrated PowerPoint, we'll interject a quiz that can be done right on Blackboard. So while they're watching the PowerPoints directly on Blackboard, they can then respond to a quiz that assures us that, in fact, the content is being covered. So in the event it's not being completely well understood, when we then get to class, we only need to concentrate on that part that requires a little bit more discussion. And so by doing this, we then can, as I mentioned, spend more time in class on higher level activities rather than just the delivering of information.